Hello everyone, Gaussian Gamer here. Just wanted to make an update video about the state of my 8-bit ALU. So now I guess it's pretty much complete once it loads. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So I guess first off, in my last video I noticed that there were a few glitches that kind of needed to be fixed. They now have been. So with the way Minecraft works, there's basically a certain render distance beyond which the game won't really actively do anything, and this line is right about here. So in my previous video, both of my variables were just empty, but the this particular XOR thing, like both of these gates, which used to be right here, showed that there was still something in them, and that's because they didn't update from when I reset. So the reason being that they were too far away. So I basically just kind of moved them up here, and I can't go any farther this way, otherwise it will just stop working. So that's kind of unfortunate, but whatever. And then the other kind of problem that I noticed with my last video, and it was just kind of luck that I didn't notice it before, but as I pointed out last time, so if I want to create like a negative signal, or sorry, like put the flip the negative bit of the particular variable that I'm working with, I had to send a signal through that button, and I originally had it hooked up to this, but when I did that, it would just update all the bits in that particular variable, and it would basically just change it to whatever was stored in either these inputs or outputs, depending on the position of this. And it was just kind of luck that every time I did that, the only thing that changed was this, and everything else just stayed the same because it was whatever was on these input variables. But then I realized that glitch and how much of a problem it was, but it has now been fixed. So instead of going down there, it now comes down here. Here's, oh my goodness, weather. There we go. So now it just comes down to here. It's that same type of splitter that's up there, but then this will just be hooked up directly to this update system. And notice when I'm not pressing the button, it'll accept whatever signal I give it from just the normal methods, so it'll still work, but it'll stop receiving that signal when I press the button because of this NOT gate, and then it'll update it appropriately. Also, since the last time I was here, I added in that functionality for both the bit shift and the inverter. So, coming down here, due to this kind of length constraints here, I just stuck all this new functionality on top of the original adders. So I just took the wires that will eventually feed into the adders, then split them off to go up here, and then this set of pistons will determine whether or not you're accepting input from A or B, depending on whether or not they're powered, namely from this line right here. But then I again split that off to go up here into the inverter. Or sorry, not the inverter, the bit shift. But the inverter is pretty straightforward. It just takes whatever signal you're giving it, then puts it through an inverter, namely a bitwise inverter, and then it will either send the signal or not send the signal, depending on whether or not this is powered. And then in terms of the bit shift, it does the same thing. You can either do a left bit shift or a right bit shift. As you can see, the lower ones there's kind of two layers here. One of them shifts each one over one bit to the left, and one of them shifts them over one bit to the right. And again, this switch right here will determine if it goes over to the display or not. And so that is all just stacked on top of this adder system right here. And just to show what I did with the actual control interface, so here is showing the NOT of the current variable. That is currently set to down, where the current variable is currently B. So as you can see, this is on, off, off, on, off, on. This is just as reciprocal, only these three on. And once again, as with everything else I've been doing, when I send these through a NOT gate or a bit shift, it just ignores this negative bit. And the primary reason for that is that if I wanted to do that, I can just change it manually just by taking the negative of the current variable, and you're done. Very simple fix. And then note, so if I just change the current variable, it'll instead take the NOT of this, in which case only that will be on, as you can see. And then if I just want to bit shift this variable, so for instance, notice that it's show the current bit shift of the current variable, and the directionality of the bit shift is determined right here. Note that up is going to shift everything to the left, down is going to shift everything to the right. And I don't know if this follows the actual like conventions of bit shifts. It more just follows the convention of this whole display system, which is mirror imaged. But regardless, so if I were to show this, so it is currently the 32-bit which is off, but now it is the 16-bit that is off. And it's also worth noting that, like, you know, this 128-bit is now turned off because, well, there's nothing above the 128-bit, so that one will also be off. And there's also no 256-bit. But I could shift it in the other direction, in which case the 64-bit would be off, and the 1-bit would be off. So you can see that here, 1-bit and 64-bit. And then, of course, as with everything else, I can send this to the current variable and just shift everything. And yeah, we're good. And so by default, on either end, it will just add in a 0. So it's more of a... yeah, so it's more like the logical bit shift instead of the arithmetic bit shift. But then, yeah, all this other functionality still works. So if I wanted to show A or B, that would be right here. Yeah, and so all that good stuff, and still functional. Everything turns off when I have nothing displayed. I can show A plus or minus B, all that. So that's about it. I guess it's done now. Nothing else to do. If I wanted to do something like multiplication or whatever, again, as I mentioned in my last video, in a recursive manner, I'd have to hook it up to some RAM, but that would basically require me hooking up this little area to both RAM and counter, which is going to be far from easy. And in addition, this system is basically stuck at being 8-bit because, well, the two variable storage units are right there, which are very deeply buried, so I could put like another one off to the side or on top of it, but you know, I kind of spent enough time on this that I don't want to have to do it again. So, yeah, it's at this point done. It's a full kind of 8-bit ALU that took some time, but I feel like it was definitely worth it. Thanks.